Bon Presto brings their second game to the Famicom, and it's the second game in the Compati Hero series. Compati Hero being the very large series of loosely connected games that slam together a bunch of characters that Bandai had the rights to. The first one was SD Battle Ozumo, which kind of kicked off the sports half of the franchise, and SD Hero Soukessen launches the SD Hero series, which is the action part of the franchise. The SD Hero series aren't great. I find that the action games are more enjoyable than the sports games, but that's a pretty low bar. They gave the game a subtitle, Tausei, Aknogundan, which translates to Defeat the Evil Army. That is such a generic subtitle, I wonder why they even bothered putting it on there. The story of this game is that in the SD Nation, where all of the SD fighters live in peace, a UFO appeared one day and abducted the capsule machine, who was their mother. Also, Emmy the engineer got snatched, but that's secondary to a vending machine being the mother to all of these characters. Now, all 12 heroes have to team up to defeat 9 stages and get them back. There are 4 series represented here: Gundam, Kamen Rider, Ultraman, and Metal Hero. Metal Hero is the only one of those that hasn't gotten their own Famicom game yet, and it was just an action series similar to the Super Sentai shows. In the US, the shows were chopped up and used to make VR Troopers, Big Bad Beetleborgs, and a few seasons of Power Rangers. Initially, you have your choice of 8 stages when you play. There's 2 that are themed around each franchise. Once you clear these 8 stages, then you can take on the final stage. You always start the level with the hero from that franchise, but it never lasts long. In these side-scrolling action games, a lot of enemies will drop something that will turn you into another character. There are 3 power levels for each franchise, represented by different characters. You always start out the weakest, but if you collect these hearts, then you increase power level by 1, and that also transforms you. Other pickups that you can collect are items for changing between series. You'll keep the same power level. This exclamation point, which makes you indestructible, but also prevents you from picking up items. The bomb destroys all enemies on the screen, while rice balls are used to restore your health. Getting the Bon Presto logo acts as a bomb, exclamation point, and rice ball all at the same time. The worst thing you could collect is a skull. That knocks you back down to the lowest power level. One of the major problems with SD Hero Soukessen is that there's not much difference between the heroes. The base level ones are all melee only. Then half of them get a ranged attack at level 2, and everyone uses ranged attacks at level 3. Most of these attacks are exactly the same. A straight-ahead beam. There are some small differences. Kamen Rider Black, for example, does a melee attack along with his ranged attack, and V Gundam gets a very tiny pea shooter that floats above it. There is one character who is overwhelmingly powerful, though. Giban, the 3rd stage in the Metal Hero team. He fires 2 beams that don't go straight ahead, but for some reason, each of them does damage. So essentially, his attacks are over twice as powerful as everyone else's. And that matters because enemies take a ton of hits to beat. In fact, there's a lot of enemies that you effectively can't destroy with a level 1 character. Another issue with the enemies is that it's very easy for them to stun lock you. Most enemies have a pattern of just moving on top of the player and sitting there. So when you take damage from coming into contact with one, you're stunned for a moment as they run closer to you, and then when you recover from the stun, you're still right there on top of them. You bounce back pretty hard when you get hit, and it takes a surprisingly long time to recover. Even worse, there's a lot of places where you're required to drop down on top of an enemy and there's no place for you to hit them. Now, there are some enemies who you can bounce off of. Which enemies? Well, you'll just have to try them and find out. It's just, for some reason, some enemies behave differently. And you're required to use that to get through a lot of stages. Many of the stages revolve around some kind of gimmick or theme, like you'd expect. There's conveyor belts on one stage, and another level is filled with oil slicks. About half the levels require that you scroll down into a pit, and on those you progress screen by screen. while the side-scrolling levels will just let you keep walking. Naturally, at the end of every stage there's a boss, and they're either trivial or frustratingly difficult. You only get one life to beat a stage with, so when a boss like this one doesn't have any obvious pattern, you're probably going back and having to do the entire level again. And speaking of losing your life, SD Hero Soukessen has one of the most annoying death animations I've ever seen in a game, followed up by one of the weirdest game over screams. You can continue as many times as you like at least, though there's no password or battery save, so you've got to beat it in one sitting. In Japan, this is remembered as one of those games that everyone got because it had all of their favorite characters in, and then 30 years later, nobody actually likes. And as for myself, yeah, SD Hero Soukessen is not very good. The best things about it are the presentation elements. 12 characters who all look kind of distinctive, though I think all of the Ultramen guys look like they have goatees. They use some of the musical motifs from the shows. The graphics are generally pretty solid, and they even include some references for fans. But playing it, the hitboxes rarely match the graphics. Character swapping winds up just being a gimmick that doesn't have a lot of effect on gameplay. I made a point of picking up all of the items that switched your character, and I don't feel like it significantly impacted my progress. The level design ranges from, it's fine, to, boy, that really wasn't well made. And fighting the monsters isn't much fun because they all either require too many hits, or that tendency to park on you and drain your life. SD Hero Soukessen feels like it comes from a team that was technically skilled, but had no idea how to make gameplay good.